Welcome to today's deep dive.
Yeah.
We are doing something a little bit different today, right?
Yeah, we are. It's a very focused one.
Exactly. We're zeroing in on just one single, highly concentrated piece of source material. It's a digital image, and it contains this really short text fragment. It's titled My Me in Me.
Right, and it's accompanied by 4 very specific tags. Hashtag fragment, hashtag self, hashtag perception, and hashtag recursion.
Yeah, those tags are super important. And, I want to point out right away to you listening, this text is incredibly short. I mean, it's barely 50 words.
It is tiny.
It's tiny, but the philosophical density packed into those 50 words is just wild.
It really is. It functions a lot like a puzzle box.
A puzzle box, yes. So our mission today is to basically put this tiny text under a microscope. Because the more you look at the specific word choices, the more the meaning kind of shifts and deepens. We are dissecting this to understand its message about internal conflict, the illusions we create, and really the nature of the self.
And it sets up its premise right out of the gate. It completely redefines the rules of engagement.
Yeah, let's jump right into that first line. The text says, sometimes all our enemies do is this, persuade us they are there when they are not.
Which is such a fascinating way to frame an adversary. Notice the active nature of the illusion there.
What do you mean?
Well, the text is shifting the whole definition of an enemy away from, like, a physical antagonist.
Yeah.
We usually define an enemy by their physical actions against us, right? They attack, they steal.
To undermine you, yeah.
Exactly. But here, the enemy's entire existence, like its only weapon, relies completely on an act of persuasion. It relies on convincing you to believe in it.
Wow, right. So it connects directly to that hashtag perception tag.
Precisely. The text is highlighting how human perception can manifest conflict purely out of belief.
Purely out of belief.
Right. If a phantom can persuade you it is a threat, it doesn't need to throw a physical punch.
Because your own perception does the work.
Yes. Your anxiety spikes, your energy depletes, all based on this localized antagonist that has, zero physical mass.
The analogy that immediately comes to mind for that kind of exhaustion is it's like shadow boxing in a pitch black room.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. Like picture you are completely sealed in this dark room and you have been entirely persuaded that there's a lethal opponent in there with you.
So you react.
Exactly. You put your hands up, you start throwing wild punches into the void, you're bobbing, weaving, burning massive amounts of adrenaline.
You're flooding your system with stress hormone.
Yeah, you're exhausting yourself. Maybe you even pull a muscle or trip over your own feet in the dark. To you, you are experiencing the absolute fight of your life.
And the physical and psychological toll of that is entirely real.
Right.
But the damage taken in that dark room is self-inflicted. It's born entirely from the cognitive load of a perceived threat. You've essentially weaponized your own biological survival instincts against yourself.
Man, that is bleak.
Yeah.
Because the enemy's only genuine power was just
initiating the persuasion, making you throw that very first punch at thin air.
Okay, but see, that creates an immediate logical problem for me.
How so?
Well, if you are just swinging at thin air and you finally stop, turn on the lights and evaluate the room, the threat should equal 0.
Right. The enemy should vanish the moment the illusion is tested.
Exactly. But the author introduces this sort of mathematical paradox to explain why the phantom doesn't vanish. The next sentence goes, after doing the math, who actually remains? That's easy. You and your enemy.
And there is the paradox. The first sentence established that the enemy isn't there.
Right.
They only persuaded us they were. So if you subtract the illusion, the equation should logically leave a single entity. Just you.
Wait, okay, I want to point something out. Look at the specific grammar the author uses to introduce that calculation. Did you catch it?
The repetition.
Yeah. After doing the math, the word doing is repeated. I mean, at first glance, I just thought it was a simple typo.
You'd think so, definitely. But look at the specific tags attached to the fragment. Hashtag recursion.
Exactly. It's explicitly paired with hashtag recursion.
Oh, wow. So the repetition of doing is actually this brilliant, deliberate echo of the recursion tag.
It is a closed loop baked right into the grammar of the sentence.
Reflecting the psychological loop the narrator is stuck in. Like they're endlessly calculating, doing the math.
It's a literal structural echo of the concept. It's a linguistic glitch mirroring a glitch in the human mind. The narrator runs the recursive math, and the result completely breaks expected logic. Both you and the enemy remain standing.
Even though the enemy isn't physically there.
Right. And the text provides the mechanism for resolving this paradox right in its title, My, Me, in Me, and in the hashtag self tag.
My, me, and me. Okay, so the enemy survives the math because the enemy has been internalized.
Exactly.
They aren't in the room with you, they are in you.
You are the room.
Wow, you are the room. So the math yields two entities, you and the enemy, because the self has effectively fractured. Right. The phantom threat you are furiously swinging at in the dark isn't an external intruder. It is your own shadow.
It's a fragment of your own consciousness that is just like forcefully taken on an adversarial role. The equation reveals one mind split into two opposing forces.
And that is the terror at the core of this fragment. You flip on the light switch in that dark room expecting to see empty space, and instead you are staring directly into a mirror.
That is terrifying.
It is, because the realization that the enemy is a self-construct forces an immediate confrontation.
Confrontation with what?
With the origin of the conflict, which brings us to the next line. Now, at this point, who persuaded whom might be a good question to ask.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because that implies the human brain actively wants to be at war with itself.
It does imply that, yes.
But why? What on earth is the utility of that kind of self-sabotage? If the text is implying that I am the one persuading myself that an enemy exists, why would I do that?
Well, the mind is a labyrinthine, highly motivated self-protecting mechanism. While it looks like self-sabotage from the outside, creating an internal enemy is frequently a perverse, highly effective form of ego defense.
Ego defense. Defending against what, exactly?
We have to consider what the mind is actually shielding itself from. It's often protecting the core identity from the devastating weight of personal failure, or from deep-seated inadequacy.
Or just the fear of the unknown.
Exactly. Facing our own limitations can trigger a profound psychological crisis.
So externalizing the threat, even if you have to literally invent the threat, preserves the ego.
It creates a protective heat shield for your self-worth. Think about it. If you fail because you are simply not capable or not disciplined enough, that's an internal failure.
Right, that damages the ego. That hurts.
But if you convince yourself that an insurmountable enemy is actively blocking your path, or that the system is inherently rigged against you,
then you have a built-in excuse.
Yeah.
An ironclad excuse for your lack of progress.
Precisely. You are no longer a failure, you are a victim. The enemy becomes a psychological scapegoat. It absorbs the guilt of your own stagnation.
That reframes the entire concept of internal conflict for me. You are building walls in your own mind, just so you don't have to face the disappointment of what's on the other side.
It's incredibly common.
But wait, that brings us right back to the text's central question about persuasion. Who persuaded whom?
Yes.
If the enemy is a self-construct designed to protect the ego, then the self is operating as both the architect of the deception and the victim of the deception.
This is the hashtag recursion tag operating at maximum capacity.
It's a completely closed-loop feedback system.
The deceiver and the deceived are the exact same entity. You are lying to yourself, and you are actively choosing to believe the lie.
It's a mind fighting itself, trying to figure out which fragmented part started the hostility. Did my anxiety create the phantom enemy, or did the phantom enemy cause my anxiety?
Right. It's an infinite loop of localized blame contained entirely within your own skull, and the text is holding up a brutal mirror to the reader here.
It really is. It strips away the comfort of the external scapegoat and just demands accountability.
It forces you to look at the massive, exhausting obstacles you have been fighting your entire life and ask, were you the one who put them there?
That is a tough pill to swallow.
It is. It forces that accountability by exposing the exact mechanism of the illusion. But just as the reader becomes entirely immersed in this dizzying, recursive loop of self-reflection,
Spinning endlessly around that question of who persuaded whom.
exactly, right at that moment, the author implements a completely jarring structural shift.
Oh, the ending, yes.
The final two sentences completely rupture the established tone.
They do. The ending is genuinely disorienting. After dragging us through this dense internal calculation, the text abruptly terminates with, if I were you, who I am not.
That dramatic shift in voice is critical. Throughout the entire fragment up to that point, the text reads as a universal observation, a shared philosophical exploration.
Yeah, the narrator uses collective language. Our enemies persuade us.
It creates this atmosphere of inclusion. It suggests that the author and the reader are standing together in this metaphorical dark room trying to solve the same psychological puzzle.
It feels collaborative, like we are all dissecting the nature of the self together.
But then, in those final moments, That collective we is violently severed. The
No.
narrator explicitly separates an I and a you.
If I were you, who I am not.
Right.
You know what it reminds me of? It's like a very specific, unsettling camera trick used in movies.
How do you mean?
Like you're watching a long, continuous tracking shot, and everything about the framing makes you believe you are experiencing the story from a first-person point of view.
Okay, yeah.
You feel entirely embedded inside the protagonist's perspective. You're seeing exactly what they see, feeling their panic as they navigate a dark hallway. You are deeply bought into their reality.
The subjective shot establishes total psychological alignment.
Exactly. Then the camera executes this impossible sweeping pan or a hard cut, and suddenly you are looking directly at the protagonist from the other side of the room.
Oh, I see.
The realization hits you instantly. You were never in their head. You were never part of their subjective reality. You were always a detached observer, watching them stumble through the dark.
That cinematic detachment is a perfect way to illustrate the function of the hashtag fragment tag.
Because the text fragments, right?
Literally, it fragments at its conclusion, breaking into two abrupt, incomplete sentences. If I were you, period. Who I am not, period.
So sharp.
The narrator shatters the empathetic connection, proving definitively that they are standing entirely outside of your recursive loop.
They are observing the math, but they aren't subject to the calculation.
Right.
The sudden coldness of it feels almost antagonistic at first read. Like they are effectively saying, I see the psychological trap you have built for yourself, but I refuse to occupy it with you.
It does feel incredibly cold, but structurally, it is the most vital part of the text for the listener.
Really? Why?
Because the detachment is not an abandonment, it is an active demonstration. You cannot think your way out of a recursive loop while remaining inside the loop.
Oh, I see. The math will perpetually circle back to you and the enemy.
Reinforcing the phantom with every calculation. The only functional way to stop the loop is to fragment the connection.
You just step outside the room.
You have to achieve metacognition.
The metacognition.
Yes. By explicitly stating who I am not, the narrator models the escape hatch. They demonstrate the power of the observer state.
Oh, wow. It proves to the listener that they possess the inherent capacity to detach from their own internal conflicts.
Exactly. You do not have to be the terrified entity throwing punches in the dark, and you do not have to be the phantom shadow absorbing the blows.
You can cultivate the awareness that coldly observes both the swinging fists and the empty space.
You become the camera that pans away.
By detaching and observing your internal antagonists objectively, you strip them of the only weapon they ever possessed.
Which is your active persuasion.
Right. You realize they only have the power you lend them through your own belief.
It transforms this terrifying claustrophobic concept of being trapped in an eternal battle with your own fractured psyche.
And turns it into a highly practical roadmap for dissolving the conflict entirely.
It is a profound psychological deconstruction, executed in under 50 words. It forces the deconstruction of the ego, the recognition of internal projection, and the final necessary step of cognitive detachment.
It's brilliant. Let's briefly distill the journey this tiny text takes us on, because the architecture here is incredibly dense.
It really is.
So we began by completely dismantling the traditional definition of an enemy. We moved away from the biological reality of external threats.
And recognize that our most exhausting, destructive battles are often fought against phantoms, enemies that possess no mass, whose entire existence relies on our willingness to be persuaded by them.
Right. And that realization led directly into the structural paradox of the math. Even when we logically evaluate our surroundings and find no physical threat, the enemy remains mathematically present.
Because we have internalized them. The room is the mind, and the phantom is a fractured, self-sabotaging element of our own hashtag self.
Which exposed the psychological utility of the illusion. We explored how the mind builds these internal enemies to serve as heat shields for the ego.
Protecting us from the crushing accountability of our own limitations.
Exactly. We become trapped in a closed-loop system, acting as both the architect of the deception and the victim swinging wildly in the dark.
Ultimately culminating in the jarring fragmentation of the final lines.
The sudden, cold shift in perspective that shatters the inclusive illusion and offers the only viable escape route.
By modeling cognitive detachment, if I were you, who I am not.
The text teaches us to become the objective observer, reclaiming the immense psychological energy we unknowingly handed over to our own shadows.
It's truly a masterclass in exposing the architecture of human anxiety.
It is. But as we wrap up our exploration of My, Me, InMe, there is a final lingering implication of this text that requires your attention. A thought built strictly on the source's themes of recursion and self-awareness that you, listening right now, will have to navigate on your own.
Let's hear it.
Let's circle back to that initial image. The shadow boxer, locked in the dark room, burning adrenaline, fighting for their life against an opponent that isn't there. The text argues that the escape hatch is realizing the enemy is just a fractured part of your own mind. It's just you.
Right.
But consider the mechanics of a true recursive loop. When you finally achieve that ultimate realization, when you finally turn on the lights, look in the mirror, and accept full accountability that you are your own worst enemy, does the phantom actually disappear? Or does the sudden, profound realization that you are fighting yourself simply become the very next loop in the recursion?
Oh, wow.
Because if the enemy is you, then defeating the enemy requires defeating a part of yourself. You risk engaging in a completely new, infinitely more complex war against the exact part of your mind that built the dark room in the first place.
That is a terrifying thought.
So perhaps the narrator's sudden cold detachment at the very end isn't just modeling how to observe the fight. Perhaps it's a warning that the only way to genuinely win a war against your own mind is to stop throwing punches entirely. We'll leave you to calculate the math on that one.